All right, what's up, GTM builders? It's Jared and Mateo again, and welcome to GTM Engineer School, where we interview GTM engineers to uncover principles, workflows, and tools in this quickly emerging space. So today, we're hanging out with Josh Whitfield, founder of Content Marketing Media, the only outbound agency certified across Clay, Instantly, Maldoso, and Octave. Josh is a true GTM engineer creator, sharing tons of his workflows, best practices, and agents on LinkedIn and X and everywhere else. So please make sure to give him a follow. Before getting deep into the go-to-market space, Josh spent 15 years in insurance, where he led agile teams focused on the development of intelligent automation solutions. Think process mining, API integrations, and RPA, robotic process automation. So he basically worked in AI and automation before it was cool. So now here we are. We're excited to unpack Josh's unique POV on go-to-market engineering, outbound, and agents. So Josh, welcome to the pod.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here. I mean, you kind of summed up my background pretty well, right? At the end of the day, it's like, we were doing boring stuff in R and Python and data science before, Claude and OpenAI so it's definitely a different world, and it's nice to kind of bring that institutionalized knowledge to be able to run the business and just help clients, in innovative ways. So it's an exciting time. Like, it's never a boring day in AI for sure.
So you probably get a lot of questions from people like who are getting into it now and just finding you, like, what is it? So how would you define go-to-market engineering in your own words?
Yeah, it's such a broad term. Ironically, like Clay even did a really good job yesterday of coming out with new information on how to explain it. So I'll just kind of, a little bit build on what they've said. Like, I see the post, right? And people are like, "Oh, Clay created this job title," right? But I kind of go back to the day of like when Salesforce came out. It was perfectly acceptable for Salesforce to have Salesforce engineers, right? Or Google came out and Google had, all kinds of job titles they created. And I think it just speaks to the fact that Clay is that much of a revolutionary technology where they're like, look, we are going to define a job title that, as I read earlier this morning, I think there's, like 100 postings right now at really big companies. Like, these aren't, mom and pop companies posting for GTM engineers. These are companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and really large type organizations. So I think it just speaks to that. And like for me, I have four, right? 6 months ago, I had zero, but now we have four GTM engineers. And it's really because it has that much of an impact on the industry where it's evolving, right? At the end of the day. And it's someone who can kind of keep up with the tech, someone like like me that is highly curious about tech that maybe has disparate skills across a bunch of different disciplines, but they're able to help a company, whether they're, two founders that just started a SaaS yesterday and built, vibe coded a lovable, app that they deployed and turned it into something marketable, which we see happen every day. Or, their 50, 100 team SDRs where instead of asking SDRs to spend 80% of their time building lists and doing, things that GTM engineers can do at 10 times the speed, they should be on the phone, right? So I think it's very applicable across the organization. And I think that's really why you're seeing it take off.
So you've had a front row seat, Josh, seeing things really evolve in a way that most people have not. So in your mind, what are the biggest differences in these workflows in the last 2-3 years versus how you were doing things previously?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I was in a very structured, regulated, organized, cloud-based infrastructure type approach, right? So the concept of vibe coding and vibe engineering and all that didn't really exist, right? If one of my engineers went off and did stuff on his laptop with the data that we were using, that's a fireable offense, right? And you don't really see that mentality anymore. I mean, at the end of the day, is yes, I work with pretty big clients, and rightfully so. They need to protect their intellectual property, their data, their customers' data. And that is a bridge that's closing today. But I think really the ability for what we could do a few years ago, it was heavily Python, heavily R, heavily Snowflake type databases, SQL, and you needed jobs or people in all of those roles, right? You needed a SQL engineer, right? You needed somebody who, the data scientists that I worked with and worked on my teams, these were PhD level actuaries, right? That understood math to the level that I could only prompt GPT to try to understand, right? And they knew it and they went to school for it and they were highly educated. So they could build these predictive regression models using Python and R. And today, I can go into ChatGPT and build most of those same models, right? And I'm not saying that their knowledge, their education is worthless. Of course, it's valuable, but the difference is the technical capability has just moved forward so fast. And I'm not exaggerating. You know, for a couple $20 subscriptions to Cursor, Lovable, you know, and a couple other tools, and a little bit of effort and a little bit of YouTube watching, you can build some pretty robust stuff that's rooted in the principles of data science. And it's just because they built the behind the scenes technology and capability at light speed over the last year that just creates an enablement that's never existed before.
Fantastic. Well, we're now going to hit you with the lightning round. Are you ready? Do you need a sip of coffee?
Yeah, well, I'll be ready, but I'll take the sip anyway. Thank you.
All right, all right. Then I'll just ask you some questions, and in as little time as possible, you just give me your answer and maybe double click on why you picked that answer.
Okay.
So, favorite CRM: HubSpot, Salesforce, or Attio?
Yeah, it's tough because me and my clients use both HubSpot and CRM. I use Attio.
Bring it on. So, top LLM: Claude or ChatGPT?
That's tough because I use the heck out of both of them. I'd say Claude, especially Claude Sonnet 4.0 and Opus. Yeah.
Tell us more.
You know, it's a master at copywriting at the end of the day, and they're both pretty equivalent when it comes to capabilities, MCP, stuff like that. But Claude is just, I mean, if you saw the emails we sent, they would be mind blowing. You would never know they were written by AI.
Love it. Top enrichment tool:
You know, from an orchestrator perspective, by far, Clay. From an overall contribute to our outbound motion, Octave.
Love it. And the top GTM engineering tool above all?
Yeah, I mean, I think today it has to be Clay, right? Just the ability to bring any API in the world into tables and rows and do that up to 72 times per row is, you know, has yet to be replicated.
Never thought of the 72 times per row, which is pretty outstanding.
Yeah, you want to make 72 API calls for one row, you can.
That's some scale. And what's the most underrated GTM engineering tool, in your opinion?
Yeah, by far it's Octave. Like, I cannot believe the world, and obviously they're growing significantly, and I'm really happy for their recent funding. But I feel like you get that tool in the hands of people, you don't need copywriters, you don't need researchers, right? It by far has radically changed our results and given credibility to professional messaging, and that's what it takes, in my opinion, to succeed in GTM today.
Bring it on. Shout out to our friends at Octave for raising 5 million recently. Yeah, shout out Zach and team. All right, thank you so much. That was fun. Now let's shift a bit gears, and I would love to chat with you about system design. So you obviously, with your clients, design tens and tens of GTM stacks for outbound motions and more. Can you walk us through the building blocks of your GTM stack and how you approach designing it?
Yeah, I'd say at a core level, right, it aligns pretty well with our key partners, right? So, you know, we onboard a client, we bring them into Octave, we're very transparent on what we do, we get them involved in building out playbooks, right? Whether it be the roles we're going to target, their existing customer references, pain points, value propositions, et cetera. And we really spend a lot of time in the onboarding process explaining why and the value, and then we get them involved. We say, you know, what do you love? What don't you love? What data? Can we train this on the Gong transcripts of all the calls you close? Can we, use case studies and really explain to them that I had to call it the brain of the operation for every client, right? Then we start to integrate Octave definitively into Clay, where we use, no matter what the original data source is of the lead, and that may be things like Apollo, and maybe things like Appify, and maybe Firecrawl scraping the web, Panda Match for lookalike, like whatever the source that my engineers use to capture the original lead data, it still comes into Clay and still feeds with Octave, right? And then from there, we build those campaigns. We use robust email verification via API, and then we push that to instantly. So, and that is where our outbound messaging goes. Maildoso is the core of our email infrastructure. So that's our general motion: Octave, Clay, instantly, Maildoso infrastructure. But we're not afraid to bring in a bunch of different tools. Like today, we're using Manus, we're using Model Context Protocol within Claude. Like I very much believe in the mindset from a GTM engineering perspective. It's my job is to get my clients data that other people can't find and really try to look for signals, intent, and really find, Clay calls it, the alpha signal, and really find that thing that really defines, like, this person is telling me they need to get or be involved in the solution that's being offered, and that they have the means or will to do so. So, like, if you look at it really quickly from the perspective of like a realtor, you can look at things like, did they recently just make a price drop on a house, which means that they're struggling to sell that house? And then in the same data points, you can say, have they sold a lot of houses in the last 6 months? And since they get paid on commission, you can make a pretty good inference that they're making a lot of money. So you've kind of identified, here's a need for this particular solution, and they have the means by which to engage. And so that's kind of just an example of, for every unique client, it's finding those signals that then take you well beyond the fact that they happen to be a founder in a given role at a particular company. Because guess what? That's what almost everybody does. And that's what makes us unique.
Love it. So again, if I had to play back at you, like there is Octave, which is the brain where you host all the grounding context on product, ICP, and messaging. Then you enrich that with an orchestration layer that is composed with both prospecting data from the likes of Apollo and like list builders, and then obviously Clay for where you can import all sorts of enrichment standards and less so. That's where the alpha is, like in the Appify's of the world, or your creativity to understand based on the ICP which enrichments to find or which signals to find. And then you have this distribution slash infra layer that is Maildoso for deliverability, as well as the sequencer, basically like a smart lead or instantly. And what are the main trade-offs that sometimes it happens you have to make when you build these GTM infra?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like from a technology perspective, I think when you use a wide variety of vendors, nothing's ever perfect, right? Just as much as an engineer might forget to put the curly brackets around first name, and so now 9,000 emails go out with "Hey, first name" instead of "Hey, their actual name." Sometimes the tech fails. Yeah, it happens. It's a hard conversation with the client, but on the other side, sometimes the tech doesn't work. Like cold email is notorious, and it doesn't matter if it's Maildoso or Instantly or Gmail or Microsoft, where it's a hard business to be in, because one day you wake up and for 3 months you can't hit Outlook inboxes, right? And you have to be adaptable. So, I mean, I think that's a pitfall with the tech. I think the other thing is I like the analogy I can give. It's like trying to hit a dartboard on the back of a 18-wheeler going 65 miles an hour sometimes, because that's how fast the tech is changing, right? Like these billion-dollar companies like OpenAI, $1 billion is probably a shortfall. Anthropic, Amazon, like Google, Meta, like all, the social media revolution that happened in the last 10 years. Now they're all going through this AI revolution, and it's like they release models like they're nothing, like they're candy, and it takes testing and a lot of iteration to understand what impact they can have, but they're so powerful that they in and of themselves, sometimes they knock out SaaS companies, right? And like, yeah, just a week or two ago, OpenAI is like, oh, we're just going to let you record every call from now on and store it in OpenAI. And there's like 9 SaaSes I've used I can think about in the last year that are probably thinking, oh God, they have 600 million users. If 1% of them start recording their call, we're in trouble, right? So that's the same impact happens to GTM, but I think our job is to kind of balance that. And then every client's different. Some clients have Salesforce, some clients have HubSpot, some clients have big teams, some clients have Salesforce, but have done a really bad job of keeping up with the data, right? So there's just so many variables to this. And I think it's really having good relationships with your clients, being transparent, being honest of what you can do. And I have many of my clients that come to me and they're my favorite clients. They're just like, hey, I don't know if this is possible, but can we try to do this with Clay? I'm like, yeah. And some of those have turned into the greatest use case. I had one client, just quick story, that was like, hey, I found this robotic pen that looks so real. Like they handwrite with a robotic pen, handwritten notes. And he's like, do you think you can dive into the API and see if we can do it via Clay? And I'm like, sure. So we wrote the API calls and everything, got it to work. And then he's like, can we connect that to HubSpot? And I will build a workflow that populates Clay. And every time somebody gets to where they're almost about to close the deal, can you find the address and automatically send them this handwritten? And that workflow runs today. Like if I'd have told you that 6 months ago, you probably would have thought I was crazy. But it's a real workflow, and guess what? It worked. Like it works. Like I'd love for somebody that I get on a demo call with, 2 weeks later to send me, because they don't know it's written by a robot. It looks real, right? So those are the kind of things that Clay and in clients bring, and it brings innovation. And Clay and these type of motions specifically, they create enablement, and value doesn't always come from meetings booked. If that handwritten note closes $100,000 deal, like we're set for life, right?
I love that you anticipated our next question, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, sorry.
I'll let Jared take this one.
No, that's fantastic. Josh, when you're starting out with a new client and they're really ground zero, what is the first play that you run with them? How do you work with them to figure out what that first play is to get them off the starting line? And if you have a specific company or project where you've onboarded them and you want to use as an example, that'd be great.
Yeah, so it's really changing. In the beginning, it was very much like, hey, here's this 3-page Google Doc, fill it out and tell us what everything. And for us, Octave changed that because we found out, like with Octave, we probably know more about their TAM and ICP than they do. And so now it's become very collaborative, right? Where on the sales calls that I do, I demo. Like I have my team go in and build a Clay table, build an actual campaign, build Octave playbooks for a demo call, right? So that's very intentional because number one, I want people to show up and like these guys are serious. They've done their homework, right? And secondarily, I want them to know like this is what you're investing, right? You're investing in some of the best tech in the world, and I want you to see it. And we're so serious that we've already built a little bit for you. And so that helps because the transition into onboarding becomes more straightforward, right? Where it's like we now do it all in Slack. We have them fill out the information in Slack. As we run campaigns, we update strategies in Slack. We send weekly reports in Slack. So we've kind of built a cohesive unit around communication. But to your question, how do we choose the first play? It's different for every client because sometimes the clients come to us because they want to execute a specific playbook or a specific motion. Other times they have no idea. And we talk through our analysis of what we think is best. And like the most recent, I don't call it a hack, but the most recent thing we've done, which has added superpowers to that, is we go into Manus AI and we do, an hour of research. And anybody can do this. You just go like, hey, here is my customer's website, or here is this lead's website. Now go build me out a robust playbook on how to get the best results for their ICP. And I'm telling you, you're getting like PhD level research coded with Python with 1,000 websites. I mean, unbelievable what you can do with these models. And even if that's all I did, the clients would be like, wow, but it gives us a good reference point and a frame of point, and we just look very competent. And it's because we do our homework, right? But it's not like we go out and spend 50 hours on the web. We just have good tools and we know the questions to ask.
Using the best tools in the world and knowing what questions to ask now, what has been the biggest impact for the clients and what's the biggest impact for you? Is it conversion rates and how have they changed? Or is it the ability to send fewer emails and get the same result? Or tell me more.
I think retention is probably the number one impact for us, especially with our clients. Most clients for us in the past have started out with, they come to us and they're like, hey, I saw you're an expert with Instantly, expert at Clay. I think I want to execute this motion. I want you to send a lot of emails, right? So many of our clients now, especially the ones that have really kind of stayed on for a long period of time, they care less about the email and they care more about the motions, right, of supporting their team. And the retention aspect comes into it is because the tools have just allowed us to be innovative, allowed us to come up with new ways to support them beyond sending emails. And especially if you're a chief revenue officer at a big company or you're a founder of a growing tech company, you want to feel like you have an advocate or somebody that is really on the forefront of AI that's supporting you, right? And that's the I don't say the vibe, but that I'm very open with my clients. I'm like, if I learn something and I think it's going to help you, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to implement it in your campaigns. And I think I would love, you guys know Julian at Octave. Like, he is a trusted advisor to me. Like, I know a lot about AI. I'm well educated, and I've run data science teams. Julian used to work for Google, right? And like my clients come to me and look to be a support and advisor because they understand the significance of AI and the things that are happening in GTM on their business. Same the way I look at Julian, right? You surround yourself with people that you support that can support you and make your knowledge grow. And that's really what we try to provide. It's more than just sending emails or building clay tables or using Octave. It's like, hey, we're gonna use our collective knowledge of the industry, our collective knowledge of having 22 SaaS clients at the moment and different innovations and plays and sizes, and bring it to all of you, in a way that we don't violate client confidentiality and strategic motions, but we also know that like this could be applicable and it's probably something we should try for.
And so yeah, Josh, like you talked a little bit about, like using the right tools and asking the right questions, right? Which from what I've been hearing from, like talking with experts like yourselves, as well as just like being in the industry, like it's one of the probably most critical skills that GTM engineering is bringing, right, into the marketplace or the talent marketplace, right? Like, prompt engineering. You also like mentioned adaptability as one of like, an important thing. But why don't you tell us more about, in your opinion, what are the really most important skills that aspiring GTM engineers should cultivate?
It's funny because if you'd asked me that 6 months ago, I'd have said prompt engineering. Today, I would tell you I think it's creativity because I don't write any of my own prompts anymore. I just ask the models to write the prompts for me, right? So that's what's changed, right? It's like you used to have to be really good at prompts. Now you just need to ask the models to write the prompts for you, and especially when they're connected to big databases and stuff. Like, so I think it's creativity at the end of the day, and balancing business understanding with creativity, right? Because the capability is only growing. If anything, we're kind of in a situation right now. It's which tool do I use? Because there's so many. So, I think it's more of like the future true impactful GTM engineer has enough institutional knowledge of the business, knows how to go find out and fill in the gaps of what they don't know. And then really whether it comes from their own brain or their ability to have conversations with these models and learn things to be creative, it's applying that creativity. Jared asked like sending smaller campaigns earlier. Yeah. I mean, 6 months ago, it's pull a list, send emails. Today, it's build orchestrated signal tables that fire off every time something significant happens, right? But it takes creativity to not be like everybody else and pull news and funding and job changes. It takes creativity to say, look, I'm going to go out and I'm going to, figure out every time someone enters a geocode radius outside of a conference location, in San Jose, right? I made that up, but I'm sure it's possible. It's that type of creativity that gives strategic advantage to whether they're supporting multiple clients or they work at a company, right? And it's just that balance of creativity and institutional knowledge, because I think the tools at some point are going to be, the entry level is going to be so low that it's whoever can orchestrate and come up with the creativity and the unique value points for their is going to make all the difference in the world.
I mean, like, obviously, I can't, I definitely agree with you, but how do you define creativity to our audience, maybe in this context? And how would you nurture or develop creativity in this space?
Yeah, I think I oversimplify sometimes some things, but I would just say, like, in the realm of, like, how do you kind of acquire and get those skills is, like, for us, we service multiple clients, so I think it's a little bit harder. Like, we have to be good at really sourcing information because some of our clients do really complex stuff, right? And there's so many of them, so I've got to learn 25 businesses. But if you're a GTM engineer at one company, right, like, the best example I can give you, and we just did this for ourselves, is like, heck, just train an AI on all this institutional knowledge and build up a brain. Like we talked about earlier with Octave. Like, I built a Delphi app of like 560,000 words that I've said over the last 2 years that have been recorded, whether it be on social media platforms and stuff. And then I connected it to Slack, and I'm on 9 calls a day. So when my team can't reach me, they talk to my AI, and they get probably better, at least more humorous answers than I would give them. But it's practical and it works, right? And it's creative. But and I posted about it because it's like, it says it definitely has a better sense of humor than me. But that's how you acquire knowledge. Like, it doesn't matter what method you go about doing it, but you've got to acquire knowledge, right? Like, who cares that you can code something? Because in reality, I can probably find an app that I can prompt to get that same level of coding, if not better. It's more about, like, companies need engineers that are come in, they're willing to learn, they can gather a lot of information, they can decipher that information down to what's meaningful to revenue at the end of the day, and then take that information. You don't have to have all the answers anymore. Like, I don't have the answer. I'm not that smart. I just know where to go get the answer, which makes me look smart. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
How much of your time would you recommend people spend playing with the new tools, exploring, so they could be that partner for creative aspect of this? So they have a wealth of tools to go to.
Yeah, I spend 25% of my existence doing it. And I'm running a team of 10 in a decent sized business at this point, because, like, I'll just leave you with this. When I was 17 years old, I used to work at Denny's. And this guy would sit across. I worked in the smoking section where they had the little bar, where 4 seats are. And this guy Tom used to come in there and sit, and I would sit there and refill his coffee and stuff. And he would stay late. I worked the night shift, and he started telling me about this thing called the internet. And he was like, "There's going to be this thing." That was 30 years ago, right? And he's like, "There's going to be this thing that connects to the internet, and all these businesses are going to be building." And I thought he was smoking crack. Like, it sounded like the future. Like, and just, we barely had AOL. We were still listening to that stupid dial tone from AOL at that time, right? So what he described to me, and so, what I decided this time? Like, I'm not going to be that stupid, right? 30 years later, when AI came along, and it literally, like, when you understand that Sam Altman is having conversations with Hollywood producers because some guy in Bangladesh in a year or two is going to be able to prompt a Hollywood level movie and kill $1 billion industry. And even 6 months ago, Sam was having conversations. Like, just look at VO3, right? And what it's doing in the last 2 or 3 weeks, right? And when you think about, like, that to 2 hours is only processing capacity, right? More NVIDIA, chips, right? And more storage. That's all it's going to take to get from there to there. AI is going to have it's killing SEO. And I'm not an expert at it, but it's just dramatically changing search. I like the joke that my kids, they're going to laugh at us when they're like, you used to go to this thing and type in words and look at a bunch of blue check marks. It's a totally impactful revolution. So it just kind of gets me back to if you are starting off, if you're learning, if you're building a business, we have families, I have 5 kids and, a business to run, but I still spend a significant amount of time doing it because it's happening so fast. And the size of this, in my opinion, revolution is 10 times more impactful than the internet. And, I'm not a political person, but even in the last 6 weeks, foreign countries are giving us billions upon billions of dollars in investment in AI. And this is after, Amazon, Google, Meta, Facebook, every one of them are already investing. So, when you take the 10 richest companies in the world and they're all focused on the same thing, that's a clue that you probably should be paying attention to it too, in my perspective.
Great perspective. You've given our listeners already a bunch of, I think, practical tips. Any last tip that you would give our listeners that they can implement today?
Yeah, I think the number one thing that anybody can do today is just go in there. It's almost like we were just talking about. Just go in there and do it. I've learned so much in the last year or two from just asking AI the questions, right? And it's just, I'll just use OpenAI as an example. A year or two ago, they had maybe 20, 25 million users. Today, they have 600, 700 million users. The capabilities of what these models and this tech can do, I truly believe this. This could be the first time you've ever heard the word GTM engineering. And if you spend enough time, even just OpenAI with web search, it can teach you how to build clay tables. It can teach you how, you don't need, I'm scared for my kids because they all want to use ChatGPT to write their papers, number one. And they're already doing it at half the colleges across the United States. But I wonder what education is going to look like, because you can go to this thing on your phone and almost ask it anything. And, a year or two ago, you're like, is it hallucinating? Today, that margin is so small. And so just use ChatGPT is free now. Just use the free version. And, if you want to be a GTM engineer, you should go learn formal education, like you guys at school, right? You should learn that. You need to have practical skills. You can't actually build a clay table in ChatGPT. But if you want to understand conceptually the skills you need, the things you should be focused on, how to be creative, etc., all of that is at your fingertips and the device that, you carry around and stare at 12 hours a day. So why not? Right?
Fantastic advice. Hey, Josh, there's a lot of places that listeners can find you and follow you. Can you name some of them?
Yeah, predominantly LinkedIn is where we do, I post a couple times a day, which is, I promise you, I don't have a copywriter. I don't have anybody. I wake up every morning at 6:00 and I decide what I'm gonna talk about today. LinkedIn is predominant, but we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on X. So.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So Josh showed us how go-to-market engineering is revolutionizing go-to-market strategies, if not changing the world. From using AI tools like Clay and Octave to creating innovative workflows, like robotic handwritten notes that close 6-figure deals. Josh is proving that modern GTM is about creativity, cutting-edge tech, and finding those alpha signals that really transform the outbound motion. It's not just about sending emails anymore. It's about being a strategic partner, creative strategic partner in the AI-powered sales landscape. So thank you for sharing both practical tips and sort of big picture concepts, Josh. This was really valuable. I really, really enjoyed this.
Yeah, my pleasure,
Likewise.
guys. Appreciate it. Appreciate you both having me.
Thanks so much, Josh.
All right, stay in touch.
Will do. Thank you, guys.